Hey everybody, welcome to Office Hours, episode 114. I'm in a slightly different location in the office today. As you can see, we've got Charlie just walking back and forth. It's pretty packed here in London, so that's pretty cool. Today we're going to show you a really interesting workflow that will be highlighted on our Twitter earlier today, and this is a way for you to find highly profitable crypto whales. It is really, really cool, and I think it's really easy to use. I think it's one of those ways where we can showcase some new features in Nansen, to discover some interesting addresses and show you the whole discover, monitor, and take action workflow. We'll cover this workflow, answer any of your questions, and I will get started in just a moment. I just saw that there was a comment in our YouTube already saying, hey, is there any, other than smart money traders, or if someone who wants to buy some token but they want to use it for stress and find that's kind of smart money? Yes, so through the who bought and who sold workflow, you'll be able to find fresh addresses, smart DEX traders, and so on. All the labels will vary and so forth when you do this workflow. So let's get started. For everyone who's new, there we have a what's new feature, and this will show you what has been shipped and what is shipping soon. We have some interesting features coming out very, very soon, including our P&L feature, which is going to be launching, I believe, on Tuesday. It was meant to launch this week, but we've had a few changes that we're going to make to it for it to come out next week. I know that many of you are very excited about it, and I hope that you'll enjoy it. So if there's any token you want us to look into, please fire away in the comments. But in the meantime, I'm just going to choose a random token that I have seen within Nansen to start this workflow. And so the first thing I can see is there's Pendle. We've covered Pendle a few times, so let's look at audio via this signal here. So this is really, really cool. The first thing we need to do is look at the net flows, see what's going on, the fully diluted valuation, 300 million. It's really interesting. It shows that it is a coin with substantial size behind it. And if we look at the price chart here, as I was saying in the thread, you can see there's been a lot of like peaks and lows here. So if you can find any addresses buying in the lows, for example, when selling high, or they sell the tops, then these can be really interesting indicators, because if you are tracking these addresses, you might find them buying very early and then selling highs, so they're making money. Or if they're selling the top, for example, it could be presenting interesting short opportunities. It's important to note that nothing on office hours is financial advice. So all I'm doing today is presenting on-chain data and on-chain workflows for you to decide on whether or not to take action. Will be dependent on what you see and what you find on the tokens. And so I just want to make sure that is very, very clear. So on this token, we can see that there are multiple time frames that are really interesting. And we can see actually right now that if we scroll up, we can see the price over the last 7 days has gone up by 56%. So that's really, really interesting. And so what I want to look into is to see if there's been any addresses that have been buying in this low right here, because we can see a huge sell-off. And I know, because I've been monitoring this token for a while, that there was some interesting signals. So signals are extraordinary on-chain events that we surface in Nansen. You can find them in the signals tab here, and they'll tell you what is going on with the token. And I noticed that there was a lot of outflow recently, and that's where you saw the investors were selling orders. So that's how I know that that's the reason for this. So I've got some context here, knowing there was a big sell-off. You can also see that's backed up by the price. And now we can see that between the 14th of May and the 22nd of May, the price was around 16 cents, and it's nearly doubled since then. So that's really, really interesting. So we're looking at the 15th of May to the 20th of May. So what we do is then go to the who bought. And we're just going to scroll quickly and go to here. And then we select in the dates. So 15th to the 20th, like so. And then we save. So then this isolates this date. So if we click on the 7-day price movements, we're looking, let's do the month actually. We're looking at this area specifically. And the reason why we're looking at this area is because we want to find addresses that bought just before the recent movement. And we can see there's been a huge spike in volume. So if we look, there's 113 million here versus daily volume of substantially smaller fraction. So 3 million, 9 million, etc. So now we've isolated the top buyers. And we know we've got the top buyers because we've picked the date range. And we've also on the bought side of things. So who bought? If you're ever unsure of what a feature is in Nansen, you can just press the I here, and this will be the tooltip that tells you what's going on. And this will tell you the largest buyers and sellers of a specified token, sorted by volume over a specific time frame. And so I know at the start of this episode of Office Hours, someone asked, but how do you know if it's a fresh dress or something along those lines? So what we can see here is that if we look at those who've been buying, there's a few addresses here that have no label. And so this would indicate that they are a fresh address. And so you can see here, if I'm hovering over, they aren't giving much away. And that's different from, say, whitemonth.eth, where we see a lot more for this address. Same for this medium dex trader. And so we can see that there haven't been any substantially big buys. But as this token has a smaller valuation of other tokens, such as Pepe we looked at earlier today, the buys may be smaller. So what I'm going to do now is press Command click on the top buyers. So anyone who's bought more than $1,000 worth, because I'm interested in seeing who they are and why did they buy. I could filter by smart money, but given the small amount of volume done here, there is very few people who are buying, let alone smart money. And if we go to sold, for example, we can see actually a smart dex trader sold. So that's quite funny. So now let's take a look into the addresses. If you have any questions, again, please fire away in the comments. I'm more than happy to answer them. Right now, I'm just showing you a workflow on how to discover interesting addresses potentially. And I've just picked a random token. If there's a token that you want us to look into, please fire away and we can go through this. So we can see, for example, this address has made 2% on audio. They have a 100% win rate. And if we right click and we go to wallet profile for token, this shows us their buying activity. So what we see, for example, is they were buying and they sold. So they staked actually, sorry, and then they bought some more again. So that shows that they are building up a position and they're locking that in. So we can see their cost basis and we can see that they're looking to buy this over a longer period of time frame. And if they look to unstake, then this could be an interesting signal. Again, let's look at another address here. So because the buys are quite small, the addresses aren't going to be as actionable, nor are they going to be crypto whales in this sense. I'm just going to show you this workflow at a high level, and then we can look into a token with a much higher fully diluted valuation that will offer and surface those crypto whales that we are all interested in. So again, we can see that they had audio, they bought and they sold. So if we go to right click, wallet profile for token, we can see they bought, and then they have again bought and they've staked. So it looks like people are staking the token from what we can see here. So this is an interesting address, and this is more interesting because the total balance is in the six figures, 126,000. That could be a greater indicator in determining whether or not this is something that is actionable or not. When we look at the yearly performance of this total address, it's gone from around this 60,000 mark, and it's now double. So that's pretty impressive to say the least. And if we go to the trade highlights, so we just scroll down, and this is something that's new within Nansen. It will be coming out again on Tuesday, which I'm really excited to share. We can see some of the trade highlights again, pressing the eye, and this will show the realized gains of these tokens within the specific time period. So 90 days all day. You can see they've had some pretty good wins. Nothing that's extraordinary, but still some wins nevertheless. We can see all their holdings. The one we're interested in this case is audio, and we're right-clicking and going to wallet profile of a token. And so what we see here is that they made one buy, it's $5,500, and it's currently up 64%. So this is a really interesting indicator of someone who has bought very early and is looking to potentially make a lot of money out of this. So in this case, if you held this token and you're really interested in it, what you might want to do is then go to manage labels and then enter some labels here that are really interesting to you, and you want to add that wallet to your watch list. So for example, you could say that Audius is the token you want to look into. So maybe you do that. So audio. And then what you might also say is that because they bought at the lows, it could be saying maybe an early buyer. So then if you want to set up smart alerts, what you can see is that whenever you find an address that has behavior like this, where they buy at lows and they potentially sell at highs, you can set up a smart alert, which is just go down here in the sides and press smart alerts. And then you'd want to create a new alert, token transfer, and then from, and then custom label, early buyer. And then you'd fill out the form here, fill everything out here, set the conditions, and then you would decide where you want to have notifications, whether that's Slack, Telegram, or Discord. And that way you would get updated every time a early buyer, an address that you've personally labeled, so it's your custom label, is buying a token and seeing their action take place. So maybe they make other moves in the market, which could be really interesting. So then you go from finding an address, then you add a custom label, and then what you can do is monitor and see what they're doing in real time. And then based on their activity, you can use that information and do your own research to determine whether or not you should make an entry, or you should make an exit, or if you should research a token, and much more. So this is just one way that you can use Nansen, and very, very quickly we've discovered an interesting address that has a substantial amount of money behind it, that is up 70% at the time of writing, time of recording, and has made a good buy, and we know that they are doing okay. If we look at the address in even greater depth, so what we can do is go to all chains, and we can see the balance hasn't changed too much out here. And we go to P&L. We get an aggregated overview of their stats. So we can see they haven't got the biggest win rate, so that's not that impressive at all. Ideally, you want to see an address that has a higher win rate. But if we go down here to the realized gains of the past year, they have made some money on Link, Render, and a few other tokens here. Let's see what they've realized in losses to see how, see what some of their losses are. I'm just wait for this to load. But then this is kind of like the new feature that we've got that really services the P&L within Nansen and how you can use this information to your advantage. As that's taking a while to load, let's just go to the unrealized gains. Wait for that to load. So there we go. You can see the unrealized, nothing too major there. So they seem to be making pretty good entries at the moment. We're only seeing down 17%, and that's a small position versus the return on investment right now in the unrealized position. So we see Render, we see LPT. I can't remember exactly what that token is. And so there's a wider theme here of some tokens that they're on at the moment and they're doing quite well on. So while their win rate at the moment is not so good, maybe we'll see that the trades that they're making at the moment are going to be ones where they do quite well. So if we right click here, wallet profile of a token, let's have a look at when they were buying. So we can see they first received the token 6 months ago, which is back here, and they made a buy here, so that's for 8,000. And if we zoom out as well for here, sorry, you can see they bought $11,000 worth. That's now worth 50,000. They bought an additional 8,000, and they took some profit here. So what they're doing is they're buying, doubling down on their position based on the conviction that they have, and then they sell at a bit of profit, and they still maintain their position. So that's really interesting to see, and it's something that we could use for advantage later on. Other address is this address. So this is another address that we identified through the who bought segment over that small time period. And we can see they have a small balance of 17,000. We use the word small relative to some of the whales that we see. Often you see addresses in the hundreds of thousands, even millions, who are making moves on chain, which is really, really powerful, and you can use those for indicators. But just because they have a smaller balance, it doesn't necessarily mean they're not that actionable. If we go all the way down here, we can see that they had a balance of just under 3,000, and it's now just under 18,000. So that is certainly a good performance, especially considering it's only been a few months of their performance. So let's scroll down here. Win rate, again, is not so great, but we can see that one of the biggest holdings, or their largest holding, sorry, CPGBT, is the one that's driving most of their portfolio growth. And because of that, they haven't realized any of their profits, and which is one of the reasons why their P&L isn't so high, because they haven't realized anything just yet. So let's just go to audio to see what their behavior is here. And again, what we see here is that they're up 60% at the moment. So they didn't buy the bottom completely. There's a few more days, but they continue to hold their position, and now they're up over 60%. So that's really, really interesting to see. And yeah, we can see that was just through 2 purchases. First, a very, very small buy, and then they followed up with a second buy. So how does the rest of their portfolio look like? This is really cool. We can show the P&L feature, and we can see their unrealized gains on this situation. So I'm only interested in the unrealized performance here because we know their win rate is quite low, but they've had some tokens where they're up quite a bit. So you can see that CGBT is up 4,200, audio $700, the ETH's up a little bit. And we can see that the biggest loss is 1,398, which is quite big relative to the portfolio. But overall, their portfolio is growing quite a bit. So that's really interesting to see. So again, while this address might not be the largest, we can set up custom labels again to see when they make entries. And as we can see, their portfolio is growing quite substantially, and they don't make too many moves in the market. So let's go to the final address, and we can see that this address has also seen significant growth, but it isn't too large here. So as this episode is focused on finding crypto whales, let's dive into some more interesting tokens and show the same workflow later on. Let's see. If there's any point you have any questions about how to use this workflow, you have any questions on what tokens you want to look into, if there's something that isn't unclear, please let me know and I can just dive into that and answer this. This office hours is a great opportunity for you to ask questions, for us to explain how certain things work on Nansen and also show off new features. I'm particularly interested in this workflow because it's a great way to surface interesting addresses very, very quickly after a recent change within the product. And I really like it because I have my own addresses that I personally watch, and I use this to use the product myself, and I also use it for creating content and stuff like that. So often when we find interesting addresses within Nansen, we create content on it over our socials, we will also actively monitor these addresses to see what is going on and why are they making moves as they are, and what are the rotations or narratives that they're looking to potentially chase. Because again, this is all on chain. We have the tool to allow you to see this. And the really cool thing about this workflow is that it is totally multi-chain. So as long as it's a chain that we support within Nansen, and we have token block mode for it, you can do this workflow and see and discover interesting addresses. So if you have a token that you want to highlight or ask me to dive into, and it's on another chain aside from Ethereum, we don't support Solana just yet, then feel free to fire away in the comments and we can take a look. So one token I think we can look into as well. I'm choosing these tokens totally at random here. Actually, I was going to do Pendle because we've done Pendle a few times. I'm going to scroll down here and go to the smart money token Inflow. A really cool thing here is that we're making a change very soon where you can kind of decide what labels you want to see within the smart money token Inflow. So let's say we are only interested in funds, and we're also only interested in DEX traders over, it doesn't matter what time period, we're just going over any time period. I can now put those filters on smart money token Inflow and see what they are doing. We'll do a post and maybe a whole episode on this workflow later on once it's live properly. But for now, this is just one way you can use it. And the first token that isn't a derivative of ETH or BTC or USD is Athena. And let's just have a quick look here. And let's look at the price. So you can see the price has gone up a little bit over the past days, but it's not too exciting. I don't think this workflow will be best for this token. So let's maybe look at Ondo. I think this token has had more of an interesting price movement. And if we look here, for example, if we see between the 16th of March to the 20th of March, the price was around 50 cents. And now if we scroll all the way up here, we can see the price has more than doubled since then. So that's really, really interesting. So how do we use this workflow to identify crypto whales? The fully diluted valuation is significantly higher than the first token that we looked into. So that's a good sign. What we will do is scroll to the custom time frame. So again, the dates we're looking into are the 17th of March to the 20th of March. So we'll go here, click on the calendar, 16th of March to the 20th of March, like such. So we've got our time frame, we can see it here. And we now are looking at the addresses that bought. And the reason why we're looking at the addresses that bought rather than the addresses that sold is because we know that the price of Ondo went from around the 40-cent mark all the way up to 90 cents to another peak of 97 cents. So we want to see if any addresses here bought and then would sell up here, or if they bought here and they are still holding at the price of $1 so they would have made money. And we can already see that the buys in this who bought section here are much higher than what we saw earlier today. So we can see Oros Global. If we go over here, we can see they're a smart DEX trader. We see some interesting labels. We see their portfolio balance is very high, and the amount that they bought is really interesting. So this is a crypto whale potentially. While they are a fund and they have their own other things, this is something that could be much more interesting. So this is a good starting point for us. So again, I'll press Command and click and go over any interesting things here. As this is a contract, it's likely that this address isn't interesting, so they may be used for doing the actual execution of the trades. And so Sometimes they aren't as actionable, but I'll go into this address just because of the amount that was bought. Maybe there's an interesting counterparty. Again, we can see an elite DEX trader, their balance is now much smaller. Maybe they move funds outside to another address, and let's just continue going through some of these addresses to see if there's anything interesting. This address here, New Jersey and Farcaster, it's always interesting to see this Farcaster label because you can see who the address is and you can search them up on Farcaster. The same goes for Frentech, and we can kind of get some alpha from those people as well. And then finally, let's just go through this address here, and let's not do that one. So we're in Aurora's Global. We can see the labels for this address. We can see the portfolio has grown substantially. We can see the total balance, and this is over all the chains that we support. We can see their current holdings, and we can see their current trade highlights. Their realized P&L is in the negative at the moment. The win rate is below 50%. But let's see how some of their tokens are performing at the moment. The large holdings all wrapped ETH, so we won't ignore that. We'll ignore that. But you can see Flip, but Ondo is the token we're looking into, specifically because of the timing and seeing if they made loads of money here. So as you can see here, it looks like they run an automated strategy where they are buying and selling very, very quickly, and their goal is to make buys and sells very, very quickly, scalping, making trades of substantial size, and they aren't someone that someone you would copy, because if you can see here, they made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 buys in the last hour. If you're thinking about the amount of gas that's required for that, while the price is up, and we can see that their overall position, where they've been buying and selling quite aggressively, they've been trading the token here. They run a strategy that not everyone can copy because of the amount of size required for this to be profitable, yet their cost basis is only 48 cents, and they're up over 136%. So it's a strategy that works for them, but it's not a strategy that the average person can rely on because of how aggressive they are in the market, and the amount of sizing required in order for this to be a profitable venture for our people. Let's go to this next address here. So it's an elite DEX trader. We can see the funds moved in, funds moved out, and we are particularly interested in Ondo for this token. So let's just have a look to see here what they were buying in the last, over that time period. Let's wait for this to load. I have a suspicion that this might be an exchange, but I'm just curious to see why they've got the contract label, and I'm also interested to see what they did with Ondo. If it's not on the first page, there we go. Lovely. The profile of the token. And you can see they ran a strategy, it looks like, and they would transfer funds out. So they've been aggressively buying through this address, and they moved to this high activity address. So I'm going to command click, and also this token millionaire, which is a different address. So it's interesting to see that they are actively moving funds to different addresses, and we're trying to figure out who they are. So what I'm going to do here is go back to this elite DEX trader and see who they were first funded by. So it's deployed. So it's likely that this address was given some money, and then they would trade based on set criteria, and they're moving funds to a different address. The first address that I'm shared at the moment is a high activity address. It doesn't offer any insights here. But then if we switch to the other address where they send funds to, so it's this active token millionaire, again, first funded by a deployer. And if we scroll back, first funded by a high activity. So what I'm just quickly doing behind the scenes is just going through the first funded to see if we can find the original source of the address to see if that loops to anything interesting. And at the moment, there doesn't seem to be anything that is actionable. But nevertheless, if we look at the address here, we can see that it's got a balance of 5.4 million. And they are making trades. Again, this could be something that's interesting. So we're looking at Ondo specifically, audit profile for token, and we can see that automated strategy. So it is that it isn't something that is something that we can take much value from. So when often you see this little robot here, it's a contract, and it may be interesting because you might see a case where a fund is buying a token, but they're not doing it directly through the wallets they have. Instead, what they do is they will use a market maker or a contract to make buys within certain prices within the market at a specific time frame, and in doing so, they get the price they want at the execution, and then they'll transfer the funds through a middle wallet and then move it to their funds, which can be really, really interesting. And sometimes you find some interesting stuff. And so let's go through another address. We can do this, but in the meantime, while I load this up, I'm just trying to see if I can find an interesting address for you all to share. And in this case, I can actually. So in terms of the whole finding addresses where you'll see a contract or something buying a token, we discovered this the other day, and we haven't posted about it just yet. And the reason why we haven't posted about it just yet is because the address has 1.2 million in USDT, and they've been actively buying this token across, I think it's a bridge. And they've been actively buying, and if we go to their transactions, we can see that they, let's go to wallet profile for token. I think this is a better view of this. We can see if we click on the clock here, they buy, and you can see when they're buying, and it's very, very frequently. So they're aggressively buying, and if we look at what the prices they're buying at, it's clear that they're buying at a certain price, and if it hits above a price, then they are slowing down. But what's really interesting here is that we can see that there's been a volume out, and so you might think that they are selling. So how do we determine whether or not they are selling? Let's just have a look into their transaction activity within this token, just to see if there is anything here. I'm just going to change the view here quickly because it's better for me. And this is a really good way of how you can use on-chain data to discover really interesting alpha. And this is something we won't post on our socials because we are actively monitoring this address, because I'm really interested to see where it goes. If you're buying this token aggressively and then you are continuing to buy and you are moving funds out, maybe there's a fund here that is buying a token or building a position. It doesn't want people to know about this. And so what we can see here is that 9 days ago, that this token here, this address, trading for implementation, sent or withdrew, tokens to this address here, Top Circle Depositor. And we can see that they sent $500,000 worth of time, and it's now worth $800,000. And we see they withdrew 2 million tokens. So let's have a look into this address. And so you can see here it's not too actionable. We go to the counterparties. So counterparties, again, if we go to the tooltip, shows you the list of addresses that the wallet or entity has interacted with in order of their flow. And we can see a wide range of addresses here. And so that doesn't really help us here in this situation because we know there's a few different addresses here, but we can't really identify who they are. But what we do want to follow is the token activity. So we'll go to this address here, we'll right click and go to a wallet profile of the token. So we can see that they still have 16,000 in this address. But what about the rest of the tokens? Let's have a look. So we can see that they've still got the tokens here and they've got the price at 25 cents. And we can see that they received the tokens from the address that we just found. And they would also transfer a significant amount. So the just under 2.1 billion tokens to Variant. And so when we go here and look at the 1 year view, we can see the address has been pretty dormant up until the last month where they've been building this position in the token here we've highlighted. So here we've just shared an interesting workflow on how sometimes you might see a contract that is buying on behalf of a fund, in this case Variant, where they would do the buying execution based on criteria that has been set out. And that contract would be aggressively buying in the market, and the reason why they do that is to get the best price, because if they were looking to buy $1 million worth straight away, especially if a token with a low market cap, which is about 300 million at the time, or 250 million or something along those lines, it could really throw things off. So it's not going to be good, and plus people will be seeing what they're doing in the market and they might want to copy. And the whole benefit of the fund using a contract or using an extra wallet to buy is so they don't get caught. So the benefits of using a fresh wallet you see here. And you can see now they are holding this token here. And if we look at wallet profile of the token, so we right clicked on the token here, we can see that they're already up 56% on their holdings, which is really impressive to see. And it's also why they're still a smart fund. So that's just a small little tip and trick on how you can do some due diligence and how you can just track some addresses. And then we'll go back into Ondo that we were looking into earlier. But that's just one of the reasons why sometimes you'll see these robot labels right here, and they could be a contract, and sometimes it's interesting, sometimes it's not, but it's always worth diving into just in case, because if you find something and you discover that a fund is buying a token for a different address, that is actionable. So go through some more addresses to see what's going on, and let's have a look at this ETH millionaire. And so we can see in this example that Ondo is up 57% in this trade here, and we want to see what is going on here with this medium dex trader. So they're being funded through different addresses, and we can see they've been funded by this address here. So what we can do here is search for this ENS name and see if they're on socials or anything along those lines, and identify who they are, maybe other wallets. But as we're quite short for time at the moment, we are going to just quickly go through this trade here and see who they are. So right click, wallet profile for token. And what we see here is that they were buying very aggressively, and they've also sold by the looks of things. So we've identified an address here that is bought the dip and then sold at much higher prices, and they no longer hold anything. So this is an address that buys at very low prices and is very actionable here. And the reason why I'm really interested in this address, again, we can see their portfolio was around the 300,000 mark, and they've almost 10x'd. So in this example, what we would do again is manage our labels and then create an additional label here where, let's say, for example, they are an early buyer once again. And because we set up the smart alerts earlier in this episode, you can see that this address is now added to that custom label. And so we'll get alerts for this address and also other addresses that have this early buyer label. So they're looking to make buys, we can see what's going on. And the reason why I'm really interested in this address now, if I'm looking at their portfolio, we can see they have different types of tokens up until this point, and now they're pretty much all in just ETH. So maybe if we go down here, we can see they have an extremely good win rate. In fact, this is probably the best win rate I've ever seen of a token. We can see they've got a win rate of 93.4%. They've traded 6 tokens and they've made 91 trades with a total realized profit of 777,000. I'm very interested in this. I'm more interested in this as well just because they have ETH, because they're looking to hold that ETH and find a next opportunity. So if they're making consistent wins here and they're making good profit, maybe their next move will be very interesting. So I would like to set smart alerts up for that address. And I'm just out of curiosity here, going to go to the P&L to see some of their wins here. And we can see, for example, Ondo 57% we saw earlier. We can see just hundreds of thousands made by this address. And it's really interesting as well because they offer a diversity of tokens. So we can see Pepe, for example, but we can see Ondo. So real world assets, meme coins. And so it's just quite interesting to see that. So I would highly suggest that if you find an address that you think is really interesting, to set up smart alerts just to see what they're doing on chain. Again, not financial advice. The great thing you want to do is see what they're doing with the data and then see what's going on from there. There's some other addresses that we can look into here when it comes to Ondo, and let's just have a look at this one here. We can see again, they made a realized profit of 27,000. They've got a 100% win rate, which is higher than the one we saw earlier, but they make very few trades. But it seems that they are focused on making one trade at a time. So Ondo, for example, then they would sell and they rotate into this token checks by the looks of things. Let's confirm. We go to wallet profile of a token. We do that by right-clicking on the token and then go to wallet profile of a token. We see that they bought at the end of the time frame that we set in the custom date frame, or the who bought. And then they would, by the looks of things, they would sell and they would sell and they would sell throughout afterwards. So they made money off that, which is what we saw. And then what I'm interested in now is seeing when they bought this token here, checks, and at what price. So you right-click, wallet profile of a token, and we can see that when they made their buy, they were buying aggressively, but the token has declined in value substantially to the extent they've lost 14% at the moment. But that's not reflected in their P&L because the P&L only focuses on, in terms of the highlights, and the win rate is when you realize something. It could be that this address does very well in the future, and therefore they will make money and they'll continue with their win rate. Because they've made very few trades in terms of different tokens, it might not be something you want to track, because while they are profitable with one trade, they have a smaller pool of tokens to reflect on. So you might want to track it, you might not want to. But these are just different indicators on what you can do. So for example, if an address has a consistent win rate and they have traded multiple tokens and they make multiple trades and they have a good win rate, an average return on investment, that is a better indicator and something you want to keep an eye on, because they clearly have a proven record of doing well in the market. Just because past successes, it doesn't determine future successes. So again, whenever you see addresses, it's always worth doing your research and making sure you see what's going on, versus an address that has been traded only 2 tokens, one of which they're down at the moment in terms of unrealized losses. But yeah, that's just one of the ways we can identify interesting addresses using this workflow. So in this episode of Office Hours, we've gone through 2 tokens, and I've also shared a bit of alpha that we'll probably post about after that address has done some buying, finished up that move. But we've shown you how you can use any token, and this could be any token on the networks we support. I think there's a token called DMT. Yeah, so I've seen a lot of people talk about this, for example. Actually, you know what? Let's do it. So as Office Hours is a little bit late, we're normally half an hour an episode, but I've been seeing people talk about DMT, and when I first saw people talk about DMT versus the price now, I would have been a much happier man. But here we are. So we can see that between the 9th of May and the 12th of May, the price was around $50. It's now up 3x. This could be very, very interesting to see who bought at this point. As the fully diluted valuation is much lower, we might see buys of smaller size. So let's just check that out. So the dates we're looking into again, sorry, are the 9th to the 12th. So let's just quickly do that. Again, we go to the calendar and set the custom date range. And we press save, and let's see who bought. And we see a few addresses here, one high balance. So I'm going to command click into this one here. And I'm really interested in seeing this address here because they're a smart DEX trader on Ethereum. So let's see what they were doing. And I also quite like this ENS GBT4. So let's see what they're doing. And so the really cool thing here, again, if you want to see what they're holding across all different chains, go to all chains here. It is multi-chain by default, and this address is very interesting because we see they have $174,000 in their entire portfolio. And for Arbitrum, what we saw them buy DMT, they have nearly 100,000. We can see their trade highlights. Again, all new features in Nansen will be multi-chain by default, and we're currently in the process of making all the other features multi-chain, so smart alerts, signals, etc. Multi-chain is the theme of the year, and I'm really excited to show you guys all these features when they go multi-chain. And we want to look into DMT, so we right-click, wallet profile of the token. Let's see what they were doing. So they actively are trading the token, and we can see they're buying and they sold at a bit lows again, but they're buying and buying and buying, and they sold at highs and they start to sell again. So it's an interesting address to see, to say the least. And we go to the PNL, for example, we can see they have a very high win rate and they've made 183% trading this token. This is all realized here, for example, but if we go to the unrealized side of things, that's where we can see the unrealized gains of DMT. So if you held this token and you want to set up an alert for this address, you would do so to see when they were to add or maybe sell this position. And then from there, you can use that to reflect on the wider market, checking the data, see what's going on, and from there, decide on how to take action. So that's interesting, and just kind of curious because of the growth of this address. I'm going to go to all chains, again, to highlight the multi-chain aspect of this to see where they are. And the biggest gain is through DMT in terms of realized gains, and in unrealized gains we can see that DMT is also up there. So it is clear that this address is focused much more on the Arbitrum ecosystem. And so when you see addresses like this, for example, which is slightly different, and we can see the highly volatile nature, it's probably due to the fact that the address is running an automated strategy. And if we look at the top tokens, a lot of stable coins with a few other little things here and there, and it's not something that we would consider to be high alpha. And if we look at their win rate, it is not that high. Their realized P&L isn't that high either, and the activity isn't something that would catch our attention. So while they may run a strategy, it's something that not the everyday person can follow. And then let's look into this address here. So we know they're a smart DEX trader on Ethereum. And then when we go to the all chain support, we can see their portfolio is massive. And we can see they've got a good win rate. It's 58%, more than every other trade is doing well. And let's have a look into their P&L here. So I'll wait for this to load. They've made 12,000 trades, so it might take a little bit longer to load up here. And we can see that they've made a few profitable trades here. Let's have a look on the unrealized gains. And so what I really like about this P&L feature that's coming very, very soon is that it does show the unrealized side of things. So we have a look here. We're trying to find DMT. We can't see it at the moment. So what I'll do instead actually is I'll go to the overview tab here. I'm going to go to Arbitrum, as that's the chain that we're interested in, specifically for this token, and see if they held anything here. They've likely sold it in this case, and because you can't see in the realized gains, they probably haven't made much money off it. And then the other addresses that we look into, there is nothing that substantial. So it's just one of those ways I just wanted to show you just how you can use our workflow and cover it across different addresses. It's a different network, and how you can get a lot of alpha very quickly. So we've gone through 3 different tokens, discovered interesting addresses, many, many whales. We've set up custom labels for more than 3 addresses. Those addresses, if we wanted to, we could set up smart alerts for, and then see what's going on in real time, and then see what they're doing on chain, and then from there use that information to our advantage. So that's the really cool thing about this. And I think the time to alpha with Nansen is only getting faster and faster and faster, and the more that we can do in improving that and explaining how you can discover alpha and how you can take action is only something we can improve on and make your lives easier. And yeah, so that's episode 114 of Office Hours, using this workflow of who bought, who sold, the custom time frame, and leveraging our new P&L feature to decide how actionable an address is, whilst also looking into their token activity to decide whether or not it's something to follow. We will post about this workflow an awful lot over our socials. I think it's really, really useful. I did something on Trump the other day, which was really cool, where you could see that there was a lot of buying activity after Trump accepted cryptocurrency and campaign donations. But when you looked at the buying activity, it was often by addresses with a very low win rate, who I would consider to be a counter signal effectively, because if you looked at the sellers, these were addresses that are up substantially. So we're talking over 1,000% on some of these positions on MAGA, which was really interesting because they're taking profit. But importantly, they were selling before the announcement, so they were just doing it as part of routine risk management. I really think this is something that is fun to do. It doesn't take much effort, and you can just discover interesting addresses very quickly. So if you see addresses, let's see tokens being mentioned on crypto Twitter, you can just take that token, do a research, and see who's buying and selling. If people are talking about it, they may have bought earlier, they may have bought a dip, they may have bought quite high, who knows? But you can do the research and discover that alpha and use that data to your advantage. And that's the episode. Any questions, fire in the comments. We'll be more than happy to answer them in great depth. We are doing more educational content. We're doing a lot more in terms of workflows, a lot more in terms of how to use a product. And any questions, fire them in the comments or reach out to us on our socials or support@nansen.ai. Have a lovely weekend, and we'll see you soon. See you next week. Bye-bye.